much for this really incredible project. Barry, I just got to say real quick, I was telling my wife about this all month. I was super excited. I really wanted to thank you for Moonlight. I'm a young Afro-Caribbean writer from Miami. And so that project was such a beautiful homage and love letter to personhood. And I wanted to thank you personally for that. So
thanks, bro.
So thank you first and foremost. Can you talk a little bit about the process of balancing your influence as director, Whitehead's influence as the necessary source material, and of course the influence of your really stellar cast?
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, Coulson, I've had this run of working on the material of geniuses. You know, Joel Alvin McCraney is a MacArthur genius. James Baldwin is a genius. Coulson Whitehead is also a MacArthur genius. And so there's a certain level of respect I have for their work. And yet I learned on Beale Street that I had such fidelity to Mr. Baldwin's work that it was hard to figure out where my creation began. I think on this one, and Coulson was really cool about it. It was very clear to me we were creating something that was completely new, that didn't have to be beholden to what had occurred in the book. Coulson has a great quote. He says, you know, it's not that the adaptation is fact-based, it's truth-based. Fact would be taking every plot detail from the book and applying it to the series. Truth-based is taking the essence of everything that happens in the book and applying it to the series. And once I kind of understood that, is as you say, the cast and the crew were the biggest engines for figuring out this is what the adaptation is. This is where the adaptation lives. And there were just so many places where, you know, one of the cool things about working in television, being the director of all the episodes and the showrunner, if something happened on day 40, I could go back into the trailer, and when we get to day 47, now this thing that was one thing on the page, that's one level of adaptation, it's become a whole new thing because of the wonderful work the actors are doing. So it was cool. The further we got into production, the further we gave ourselves the freedom to create.
Hey, William, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. I know earlier you were talking about not really having a choice, but just putting yourself out there and hoping things come to you. At least for the sake of us in the comic book world and the universe, I really hope the universe chooses you as our next Reed Richards. I know the internet would lose its collective minds. We'd really love to see something like that. But just thinking about your remarkable performance in this series, can you just talk a little bit about what Royal means to you? Thinking about the past and the present and how still many remnants of the past resonate today. What does this character mean to you?
Well, Royal to me is actually a lot of things that I wish I was. He's really confident. He's very gentle. He's ahead of his time. He's very clear on what right and wrong is. Not that I have a skewed sense of right and wrong, but he's very active in correcting things that he thinks are wrong. And I sometimes I get paralyzed when trying to figure out what the correct course of action is. And I think it is due to a general sort of lack of confidence in a lot of ways that I don't think is dissimilar from a lot of people. And so I really enjoyed trying to really explore what it felt like to be a person who's not afraid to just maintain eye contact with someone, to really feel centered in who they are, to have the clarity of purpose to act when they deemed it was appropriate. Those are all traits that I admire and things that I'm working on. So getting to play Royal was just, I guess, in a lot of ways, an exercise in seeing how I can kind of develop those things in myself a little bit more.
Possibility. He represents hope, and he represents courage, that courage to, despite maybe your physical reality being completely against you, to still, despite that, be in the continual pursuit of true liberty and freedom. So I, as Aaron, respected greatly Caesar and was very nervous about taking on that character, and did it very just with a lot of great respect, because I admired the traits that he as Caesar had and wanted to bring that to the screen as best I could.
I was curious what characteristics were challenging and maybe not so challenging to navigate for Caesar, because I know some of your castmates felt they were like a hand in a glove with their characters. Were there moments that you felt, man, how can I do this? How can I genuinely evoke the feelings of what's going on? Or were there moments where you just felt so in tune with Caesar? What was that experience like?
Yeah. Wow. That's a question. I think for me, just as an actor, no matter what project I do, I always set myself an objective of truth and an objective of authenticity. And that allows me to constantly, from the first day all the way to my last day, always be in the pursuit of that truth and that authenticity. So it allows me to feel like I've never got it. And that's a feeling that I want as an actor. I want to feel that I've never quite get it, because that means that I'm in the frame of mind that I'm always pursuing like evolution and growth and authenticity. So I think that's where I was with Caesar the whole time, constantly trying to discover more about him and get closer to him.
Thank you so much for this really just remarkable and devastating performance. Can you talk a little bit about what Mabel means to you? You know, thinking about the past and the present and how there are still so many remnants of the past that act on us today. What's Mabel overall mean to you?
I think Mabel means, humanity to me and human fragility as well. Which I think is important to remember. We saw, particularly last year with the Black Lives Matter, which obviously started in America with the atrocities there, and then there were these kind of ricochet effects around the rest of the world. I know there definitely were in London. We're all human beings, and yes, we have the capabilities to be strong and to face adversity and to try our best to create, happy lives in difficult circumstances, but we struggle and we fall and we stumble and we break as well sometimes. And I think seeing a character like Mabel, particularly a Black woman, because there is this trope of the strong Black woman who has to carry everything on her shoulders. And I think particularly to see that and to be able to see the two ends of the spectrum, I think are so important, because we need to be able to engender empathy within our societies and across the world in order to be able to actually make advancements and to be able to look at each other and see what the other person is going through. So yeah, I think Mabel is really a manifestation of that duality that all human beings have, the ability to be strong, but also the ability, the necessity to be vulnerable.
So Mabel, at least screen time wise, does not appear as much as other characters, but still looms so large throughout the entire series. What was that process like, thinking about how impactful each of these scenes will have to be, and how large she'll continue to loom for characters even after she's gone, even after she's out of the picture?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It was kind of strange because as you say, I sort of knew the significance of my sections, but was also slightly removed from the other characters. I saw some of the actors, in passing, but in terms of the little group that I worked with, it was quite small, and there weren't that many people who were tied to the sort of real-time narrative that Cora was going through. So I just had to kind of throw that away, though. I couldn't allow that to be something that kind of dictated the way in which I played things and approached things. I just had to be in Mabel's world at that time and only focus on that. And I think the only other thing was that even in Mabel's episode, it covers quite a lot of ground in the way that the rest of the series kind of has a bit more space and time. But Mabel's episode is very dense in terms of the events and the amount of information that you're given. So myself and Barry had to, work really hard to make sure that we were just tracking the journey as we went along, because you often shoot out of sequence, so it's not in chronological order. So we had to just make sure before we started each scene that we were aware of where we were pitching it you know, so that when you stitch it all together, the arc makes sense, both for Mabel and also for the rest of the series and the way which he's interspersed her moments in other episodes.
Hey, Joel, thanks so much for taking some time to talk with us. Your performance was really caustic and potent, as we'd expect from a slave catcher like Ridgway. Can you talk a little bit about the ways the past, the present, and Whitehead's novel helped influence your portrayal of this really just violent figure?
Well, it was, one of the only reasons I really was willing to undertake this, apart from my real enthusiasm to work with Barry, was that Ridgway is definitely an antagonist in this show. He's a villain. But we catch one window into the makings of his mind, well, two really. His relationship with Homer, which is completely contradictory to who we think he might be, that he might take on under his wing as sort of a father-son relationship with a young, freed by himself, young slave. But the other one is his father. And I watched, talking about the present, I watched the news, and particularly during the last presidency of this sort of growing confidence to be out in the world of white supremacy and white supremacist groups. And I often ask myself, it's like, all right, they're a group and we see them as this group, but that group is made up of individuals, and those individuals came to that way of thinking by a process of education, of who fed them their ideas, of the environment that they grew up in. Because I don't believe we're born that way, to see each other as less than or greater than. I think we see each other on an equal plane when we're born with fresh eyes. So I was really interested in Ridgway being a window into at least the makings of one person that has a framework of a view of the world that I consider as bad and despicable, and go, okay, well, is that an access point for all of us to ask the question, how do we become our own way of thinking, whether it's, on a morally upright side or a morally crooked way? And fascinating to me, another contradiction in the show is that Ridgway's father is not the person who's gone, hey, son, we're the great race and everybody else can, like it or lump it. His father tried to teach him that we're all possessed of a great spirit, that we all deserve our same foothold in the world. And yet he chose to say, but Dad, everybody else is owning slaves. So why you, and saw his father as weak. Now that's not every white supremacist's or, bigoted person's journey. It's one journey, but I think it's an access point. And I found that a way in to go, we can understand this man in a more complex way than him just being violent for violence sake. And we can understand him while not sympathizing with him. And one of the big questions I had for Barry when I was coming into this is, I'd read a few of the episodes and I said, please don't tell me that this man gets redeemed in the show, because I think while revisionist histories or wish fulfillment can hold their place in a story, I don't believe that it would be the great message to go and take Ridgway to a place where we're like, oh, he's okay, that guy, he's not okay.